Now, I teach ancient and modern Hebrew a lot when I travel, and so I'm going to use like Yeshua's name instead of Jesus, because that's his Hebrew name. And this is Shimon Kepha. That's how we pronounce Simon Peter. The word Kepha in Hebrew is the rock. Shimon is from the Shema, the one who listens. He said to them, I'm going to fish. Now, this is obviously after the resurrection, and they had received the most powerful message of the kingdom from a woman. I love that. So this woman comes and knocks on the door, and she says, Yeshua has a word for you, boys. And he's not dead, he's alive, and he's going to meet you in the Galilee. I just love that. I just think that's so cool. And I love Mark's version of it, because in Mark's version she says, so Yeshua is not dead, he's alive, and he's going to meet you at the Galilee and make sure, Peter, you're there. He includes Peter, because you might know how Peter was feeling after all that disaster, right? So he lets him know, you're still in the family, man. And it's interesting. I'm not going to do a lot of theology this morning, but it's interesting to me that before the cross, he called them his Netzarim, his disciples, and after the cross, he calls them his brothers. And that's what this message is going to be about this morning. It's going to be about what Eric said to you just a few minutes ago. It's going to be about identity, who Yeshua is and who you and I are. All right? I forget to do this. Oh, I didn't read it all. Sorry. I'm going to fish. They said to him, we are also coming with you. They went out, immediately entered into a boat, and that night they caught nothing at all. But when it came early morning, Yeshua stood on the beach. However, the disciples did not know that it was Yeshua. Then Yeshua said to them, brothers, have you any food? They answered him, no. And he said to them, throw the net on the right side of the boat, and you shall find. So they threw, and they were no longer able to draw it in because of the large number of fish. Shimon Kepha went up and dragged the net to land filled with 153 big fishes. And though there were so many, the net was not broken. Now, I don't know if you've been to Israel, but if you go to the Sea of Galilee, Kinneret it's pronounced, there's 11 different kinds of fish in the lake, and none of them are big. So whatever these were, they were a miracle fish. And being from Alaska, I think they were king salmon. So I just say it again. Simon Peter went up, drew the net to land full of great fishes, 153, and although there were so many, the net was not torn. Now, in both the Greek and Hebrew language, we have things involved in those languages that are not in English. So for instance, in Hebrew, every letter is a word, which we don't have in English. Every letter is a number, which we don't have in English. Every letter is a musical note, which we don't have in English. And every letter is a color of the rainbow, which we don't have in English. So when you're reading an English Bible, and I'm not putting down the English language, although I don't really believe we speak English, we speak fluent gibberish. I don't know if you've seen your texts lately, but our language is completely being evolutionized, isn't it, by text. And we're actually relearning Pehonics. Explain it to your neighbor if you don't get it. By the way, does anybody here know the difference between an Israeli and an Israelite? Anyone? About 45 pounds. So, explain it to your neighbor if they didn't get it. By the way, at the park next week, you got to bring your own Bud Light. Just a joke. So the Hebrew language has all these things. So an English Bible, you're never going to get more than 25% of what's available in Hebrew. You're not going to get the numbers, you're not going to get the musical notes, and you're not going to get the colors of the rainbow. But those things are all there. So these are the numbering systems. And then in the next slide, you have the Greek numbering system. And so I'm going to share some verses with you that all involve the number 153. All right? So he drew the net up to the land full of great fishes, 153 times 54. The next slide is fishes, is 1224. The net is 1224, all connected to a number 153. Casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find all those phrases in the Greek language include the numerical values of 153. I don't think I'm mathematically smart. I just happen to have a really good calculator, which is all you need. You don't really need to know math anymore. Just make friends with a mathematician and have a good calculator. That's all you need. Okay? And they were not able to haul it in because of the multitude of fishes. Multitude of fishes is a phrase. Follow me. Fishers of men, all 153 connected. He called them and immediately left the boat and their father and followed him. I am the way. In fact, I am the way, the truth, and life is interesting because it's a reference to the tabernacle and the temple. There was 3 ways in. You had to come from the outside, like out here on the street, and then we would say foyer, or in the tabernacle, that would be called the outer court. But to get in there, you had to come through the door called the way. And then when you come in here, you come through this set of double doors, and that gate is called the truth. In the tabernacle, it was actually 4 curtains. It was red and white and blue and purple. And then once a year, the high priest would go in and play the drums. We call that Yom Kippur. And it's not a tongue-in-cheek joke. He would actually play the Ark of the Covenant because it's a box drum. So you have to know the culture to know what that sounds like. But there was no gate in that curtain that was 18 inches thick. He was miraculously transported into the presence of Yahweh, and he had to be miraculously transported back out. But they called that the gate of life. So when Yeshua said in John 14, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to Abba except through me, he was telling them, I'm the door, I'm these gates. Way, and the truth, and the life, all connected to 153. Here's from John 10, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. Enter by the door into the sheepfold. The word the door, all connected to 153. The narrow gate, I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in. All connected to 153. Isn't it amazing? Some of you have thought for a while now that your Bible's kind of boring. There's a lot of other things to explore. Take all these verses I gave you and work them all out with the musical notes. Wouldn't that be an interesting composition? All right? Laura and the other artists in the room, take all these and work them out with the colors of the rainbow. Wouldn't those be interesting paintings? You see how much of this revelation we have missed because we have confined ourselves only to the words and the theology. But there's feeling and emotion involved. There's activity. There's sound. I put the whole 23rd Psalm to music, 225 Hebrew letters. And I made out a whole composition of the 23rd Psalm. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And it brings something to you to hear the sound of this poetry. I loved our sister's poem this morning, prose this morning. But can you imagine if we'd taken all the letters of that prose and assigned musical notes to it and had that playing while she was reading it? It would have just added that second feature of emotion for us. And you know as well as I do, movies without soundtracks are stupid. Right? You got to have that weird sounding music, and that's what helps get you scared. And you want to tell the guy, look behind you, look behind you. Too late. But that's what music can do. And that's why it's part of the Scriptures. It's a powerful part of the Scriptures. Now we're going to look at the Hebrew, and it's interesting because in the Hebrew, which is called gematria, there are only 2 phrases in the whole Bible that add up to 153. There's dozens of them in the Greek language, but only 2 in Hebrew, and they both have to do with identity. So the first one is the word ha-pesach. Now, the definite article ha, which is an H in Hebrew, is always attached to a word in Hebrew language. So it doesn't stand by itself in a sentence like it does in English. So anytime you see ha in your Hebrew Bible, it's the word the. Okay? So it's translated into English, the Passover. And those are the Hebrew letters of ha-pesach and their numbers, which you see adds up to 153. Now, they've just had the Passover with Yeshua like 4 days earlier. All right? Now, the Passover is one of the 3 feasts that the Bible tells us to keep in Leviticus 23. The Passover, Shavuot, which is we call Pentecost in church tradition, Feast of Pentecost, and then Sukkot, which we call tabernacles in the Western tradition. All right? So Passover is the first one you keep, and the first Passover was not in Egypt. I don't know if you ever stopped to think about that. But the Passover is about the sacrifice of a lamb, the putting of the blood on the door, so that you will spare your child, your firstborn child. But the Bible tells us that Yeshua was the lamb who was slain from when? The foundation of the world. So the first Passover wasn't in Egypt, it was on earth in Egypt the first time. But we don't know how many times in past eternity they've kept the Passover. And since he tells us these feasts are eternal, if they're eternal, then they were eternal in the past. But the disciples, the brothers, are kind of like Western Christians in a way. And probably like most people, although I can't speak for most people. But we have a tendency to take things that we do in a regular quantity, and they end up becoming our tradition. And it doesn't take very long before they lose their meaning, and when they've lost their meaning, they've lost their value. So our disciples have been keeping the feast ever since they were young, and every year they look forward to keeping the feast, but it's also a pain in the butt. All right, you got to fix all this stuff, you got to prepare all this stuff, you got to get your family ready, you got to get all the leaven out of can't be any gluten in the house. It's just really, it takes a whole week to get ready for one meal. And the only thing good about the meal for these disciples at that point was that you get 4 glasses of wine during the meal. Now, they didn't have wine glasses like we do, or like Cindy does. You know, they're about this big. The stem is 5 times longer than the cup, right? That's American wine glasses. They had goblets that looked like something from Germany. So by the time they had had 4 of those things of wine, they couldn't stay awake with Yeshua in the garden. It was amazing they even got to the garden. They probably didn't even know where they were. One of them probably went, boy, there's a lot of trees here. So the meal had become kind of this thing you go through, the thing you do. And they're kind of like, ooh, when it's over with. Thank God that's over with. And it lost its meaning and its value for them. And so they didn't recognize Yeshua when he was standing on the shore, because he was bringing them a new revelation about his identity. I don't know if some of you know it, but I'm a member of the St. David's Anglican Church in Burbank, another group like you, which I dearly love. But it's high church, you know what I mean? And there's times when you like a service that's only 1 hour long. Just saying, that's all. But of course we do the Eucharist. But I love when we come to this part every Sunday when he says, therefore cleanse out the old leaven so that you are a new lump as you are unleavened. For also Messiah, our Passover, was offered for us. Now it's no longer a meal. Now it's no longer a tradition. It is what it always was in the eyes of Yahweh. It's a person. It's the lamb slain before the foundation of the world. And as soon as you take Yeshua out of things, they devolve into theology. So in seminary, we had to learn the doctrine of soteriology. Spent a lot of time on that. Simply is a big word that means salvation. What we forgot in seminary, or at least my professors did, was that Yeshua himself said, I am your light and your salvation. And that his very name, Yeshua, means salvation. They took the person out of the doctrine. And it just became theology. Resurrection is not an event first. Yeshua said, I am the resurrection and the life. It's a person first. Life itself is not simply an existence or an essence. He says, I am the life. And those of you this morning that have Yeshua, he says, if you have him, you have that life. That life is not your own. It's his life, because it's not just defined by essence, it's a person. He's alive in you. Truth is not just a presupposition. I am the truth, he said. Truth is a person. If you have truth without the personage, it becomes really dry. And then it devolves into argument. Because then my truth becomes more true than your truth. And that's what denominationalism is. Denominationalism is nothing other than people who believe their truth is more true than someone else's. That's all it is. But if you keep the person of Yeshua in it, that guy down the street, that gal down the street, and that other pew this morning, that's my brother and sister. Amen. Yeah. Why? Because of the person of Yeshua who made them my brother and sister and made me their brother and sister. So the disciples didn't recognize him. They couldn't understand it. They couldn't see it. Is he back there? Yeah. Okay, I got a time in the service when I use some help. All right, so the disciples didn't know who they were. So the other phrase in the Bible that uses 153 is pronounced B'nai Elohim, or the sons of Elohim, or in your English Bible, it's going to say sons of God. All right? Some of you have a different version, so it might say sons of Adonai. Well, I don't know all the other versions, so I'll leave it at that. For us, it's the sons of Elohim, B'nai Elohim. And it adds up to 153. So let's go through the little story again, and I'm almost done, but I want you to get it. They had gone to the Galilee, but they had also gone back to their old previous cross life. They went back to fishing in the darkness at night. And that's not a judgment. We all come to Yeshua in darkness, all right? Even Nicodemus in John chapter 3 came to Yeshua at night. We all come in darkness. The difference in this story is he came to them in the light. And I want you to know that difference this morning. You have not come to him in darkness, no matter what your circumstance or situation is this morning, and many of them have been mentioned already. You're not coming to him in that darkness. He's coming to you in the light of resurrection. And he's waiting for you to recognize who he is. But you can't do that unless you know who you are. Okay? So they'd fished all night in the darkness and caught what? Nothing. And what side of the boat were they on? The left side. All right, you got to know a little Hebrew culture to understand right and left. All right? In the Hebrew culture, the sheep are on the right, the goats are on the left. At the Passover, John was on the right, Judas was on the left. And that isn't saying anything about them as persons. It's their tradition in the Hebrew culture. The youngest person at the Passover is on your right, if you're the host, and the oldest person is on your left. That's just cultural tradition. It turns out, of course, it's kind of prophetic too, isn't it? This is the beloved one, and this is the betrayer. And then you have in the culture Jacob on the right and Esau on the left. And by the way, there is no harvest in Esau. In Matthew 13, there's this parable of the 4 soils. And there's 3 soils, and none of them produce a harvest. But they all in the Hebrew language, if you look at that text, come from the word Esau. There's no harvest. But the 4th soil is the good soil. And it produces 160 and 30. There's numbers again. Numbers in the Bible. What do they mean? Oh, I'll tell you. That's why I'm here. I tell you stuff. You pay me really well, by the way. I don't know if I'm revealing secrets here, but you're a very generous group. And I really appreciate that. Because not all groups are generous. But it happens to be part of the spirit you have here. There's a spirit of generosity that flows from both directions. And it's good. It's good to be in that spirit. 160 and 30 are simply the ages Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were when they had their firstborn sons. They are the good soil. They are what we call our patriarchs. That soil is so good that those of you that are believers here this morning, you are still called the sons of Abraham. You'd think by now you'd be called the sons of Yeshua. No. You've come out of that same good soil. 160 and 30. Esau cannot produce a harvest. And so Yeshua says, hey boys, got anything? Now you can imagine how embarrassing it is for professional fishermen to tell anybody we're skunked. I mean, you and I don't even do that. We go out fishing, and then if we don't catch anything, we run to Albertsons and we buy a big salmon and bring it home. Hey, look at the fish I caught. The fish we caught was this big, and the fish we bring home is this big, you know. So these disciples had to admit that they were skunked. Man, that must have sucked. You tell him. I don't want to tell him. Well, he loves you best. Yeah, but you're the fisherman. We haven't caught anything. He says, well, why don't you move over about 3.5 feet, throw the net on the sheep side, right? On the Jacob side, while the sun is up. See what happens. And immediately their net was full. I love that. Boy, that is the kind of fish finder I want to have on my team. What, it's over there 3.5 feet? Yeah. So they bring this thing to shore. Yeshua already has breakfast for them. And in verse 11 of John 21, Shimon Kepha, Peter, goes back and counts the fish and comes back with the report, 153 large fishes. And I'm sure Yeshua took the time to explain why they caught 153. Who he was. I'm your Passover. It's not merely a leg of lamb and a boiled egg and some matzah. It's more than that. It is that. It is the communion that we took here this morning. It is that bread and that wine. But it's more than that. It's a person who's alive. And if you'll keep me alive in your life, you'll see who I am. But guys, you don't know who you are. What do we read in Thessalonians? For you are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of the darkness. So I close with this. You and I are the sons and daughters of Elohim. And we're of the day. And we're of the right side of the boat. And he has an immediate harvest ready for us. And I'm convinced that Yeshua's desire is for us to know him and to know who we are. I say this all over where I travel, and I'm actually starting to believe what I say sometimes. But I believe the most dangerous person to Satan is a person who knows who they are. Some of you have come into this room this morning, and I'm writing a country western song. I actually am. And it's when did my luggage become my baggage? All right? Because a lot of the things you and I are involved in started out as luggage, and now we recognize it's baggage in our lives. And some of you have come through the door this morning, and you know what the baggage is. All right? And it's okay to lay that baggage down, because Yeshua is a great baggage handler. And he won't lose your baggage. All right? What was the last thing in that verse? The net was not torn. You know what that is? That was the only thing the disciples had to offer. Come to him with your baggage. He'll use you to get an immediate harvest, and he's not going to tear you apart. He's not out to destroy us. Those poor guys, the first time he met them, they were mending their nets. Mending their nets, mending their nets. Now he doesn't even care what the condition of the net is. Just get it to shore. And the net was not torn. Just come to the shore. Come to Yeshua. Come to him. You don't have to come in the dark anymore. He's come to us in his light. He's got the breakfast ready. The food is already prepared. Know who he is and know who you are. Know who you are. That's why when I travel, I wear my regalia when I teach. I'm Inuit. I'm native. I'm not trying to show off, although I think it's cute looking. And from what I see from sitting here, it adds a little color to the room. Some of you could use a little more color. But you got to know who you are and be brave. You can't hold back. I'm not going to not be Inuit. I'm not ever going to not be native. I know who I am. And I am a son of Elohim. Amen. You are a daughter of Elohim. I am 153, but I don't want to live to be that old. All right, I'm going to close with a little prayer on my flute for you. Thank you for hosting me. Eric and Cindy, my dear family. I don't know, some of you may not know, we adopted them into our native tribe. They have native names. His is Bubba. No, it's not. I'm joking. But hers is Sissy. No, that's not true either. I have a table at the back, and it has DVDs, and it has the books I've written, and it has jewelry that I make. So please stop by there and see those things. They're kind of our tent making. They kind of help us get from here to the next place, that sort of thing. I'll be back there after the close of the service, and if I offended you in any way, please don't bring it up. All I can do is ask, right? Yes, okay. Well, thank you so much. And I know, go Broncos. Okay, I get it. Actually, I'm going to start this way.
Thanks for tuning in to a message from the Sanctuary Church. For more information and media, go to our website at thesanctuarywestside.org or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube.